and welcome to Learn Coding Tutorials. In this video, we are going to learn how to use jQuery to make a simple to-do app, which I will demonstrate in a little bit. But first, what is jQuery? Well, according to the website, it makes things like HTML document traversal, and manipulation, event handling, animation, and Ajax much simpler. There are some modern tools where, we probably wouldn't use jQuery for, but it's still a really good foundational thing to know for JavaScript. So here's the app that we're going to be building. You can click on these items to make them green and red. You can edit them, so I can do jQuery tutorial now. This is very similar to other tutorials that I've done. You can create stuff, so wash dishes, press enter. Oh, I spelled that wrong. You can delete them. And also in this app, we have a little bit of animation with validation. And so if I try to create an empty task, you'll get validation. And you saw that it kind of slid down. Task cannot be empty. And then if I press start typing, you'll see that it's going to fade out. So that's some cool animation there. Well, not really that cool, but if I write take a nap and then press create, you'll see that it slides down. If I continue typing, it'll go away. So state-of-the-art user experience here. And that's pretty much the app that we'll be building. So this app is going to use some basic jQuery syntax, and let's just get started now. The text editor that I'll be using is going to be Sublime Text, which I would highly recommend. So go ahead and download that. And when you get that ready, go ahead and come back to this video. And before we go any further, here is the GitHub repository in case you want to grab the code. There will also be a link to this repository in the description below. So let's get started now. First off, let's open up our Sublime Text window and let's create our jQuery folder where all of our code is going to live. So here I'm going to create a new folder called, let's just call it jQuery to-dos, and we can just drag this over here and that'll open it up in our Sublime here. And let's grab the jQuery code. So the first, we're going to keep it local instead of just using the CDN. That way we won't need an internet connection when we do this. So let's just have a jQuery.js file here. And inside of this jQuery.js, let's just throw in some jQuery. You can just go to this website here. And then we'll just click this. Let's do minified. And then let's just copy all of this into that file right here. And then we'll save it. So now we have our jQuery code. And now let's create our index.html where we're going to set things up. So index.html. And here's what we're going to put in here. Let's do some basic boilerplate HTML here. Title, let's just call it jQuery tutorial to do app. And then to get our jQuery into the page, we are going to do a script src equals jQuery.js, which is going to reference that full file that we just created. And so we have that. And now let's create a file where our jQuery code is going to live, or our JavaScript code. And let's just call this scripts.js. And let's now create that file right here. So new file, scripts.js. And just down here, just to make sure that it's working, let's create some boilerplate code here. So let's so div id equals app container. And there's a bunch of different ways we could do this, but we're just doing it this way. And let's go to our scripts.js. And here we're going to do our first jQuery code. And it's just going to be this document ready function here. And what this $parentheses here means is it's going to wait for the document to load before running our JavaScript code here. This is the same thing as doing jQuery.ready function. And so this is just a shorthand for that. And by the way, this $sign is the way that we access jQuery. This is a variable used for jQuery. And so basically this is going to wait until the document, the DOM loads before running our JavaScript. And now let's just do something really simple. Let's just grab this is going to be called a selector. So what we're going to do is we're going to grab this app.container. And to do that, we use something called selector syntax, which is going to be $, parentheses, and then quotes. And then this £sign represents the ID. If we wanted to access the class, we would use dots. And we'll do a lot of that later. So let's just first put something into the container just to make sure that it's working. Append hello. And then let's just make sure that that's working by opening up the HTML file. And I have a browser sidebar extension here, but you can just find the file in your folder and double click on it. We're going to open it in Chrome, and you can see this hello that we've appended. So we can already see jQuery working, and so we've set that up correctly. And now let's just do some more basic boilerplate setup. So let's just create an H1 here. Let's call this the jQuery to do app. And let's get rid of this code in here for now. We'll put something else in there later. And we can refresh our browser to see that there. So first part's done. And now let's just kind of write in our create form that you see in this example right here. So we're just going to create this form up here. And to do that, let's just create an input, or let's make it a form so that we can actually submit it by pressing enter. And let's give it the ID create form so that we can grab this form when we want. And let's put an input in here equals create input, and then button create. And we won't mess with this for now. Let's just have it ready here. Whoops, let's do that. And let's refresh our browser here. So now we have that form. And then let's set up our basic table here. So let's have our table. Oops. T-head. And then let's have two different columns. So remember, we have here our tasks and our actions. So let's create those headers for now. And right now we're just setting up our app so that we'll be able to use jQuery to play around with it a little bit later. Let's make it a task, and then actions. And then let's create our T-body. And for here, we're not actually going to fill it in with anything yet. We're going to use jQuery to fill in this T-body. Let's call this the to-dos list. All right, and let's refresh our browser. And so we have those things there now. All right, so now what we're going to do is we're going to fill in our table with some, basically some placeholder to-dos, which you saw in my app here. It starts with 2 to-dos there. And let's just put in, let's just first create a variable called to-dos, and this is just going to be some dummy data that we're going to use. And we're just going to use the same data that I used in my example. Task will be do jQuery tutorial. You can put whatever you want in here. And we'll put is completed is false. We'll use this for the red and the green in a little bit. And then let's have a second task. Take a nap. Is completed. True. And now what we want to do is we want to append these to-dos into our app. So we want to put those into this table here. Specifically, we want to append them into this to-dos list T-body here. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to create a global variable called app, which is just going to basically namespace our app and avoid polluting the global namespace. And so let's have a method in here called show to-dos, and it's going to be a function. And what show to-dos is going to do is it's going to grab the EL here. So we want to grab this to-dos list EL here, and remember we use the selector for that. So we'll do to-dos list EL is going to equal, and we're just going to create that selector. And the reason why we're making this a variable here is because it's kind of costly to identify and define a selector, so we only want to do it once in this method here, because we're going to use this element multiple times in this method here. And first, let's just make sure that it's empty, because in the future, we want to make sure that we don't duplicate our to-dos. And what we're going to do now is for each of the to-dos up here, we're just going to append them into the table. And so to-dos.forEach, these are just native JavaScript methods here. And it's going to be a to-do there. And inside of this for each, we're going to basically do to-dos list EL. So you see we're using the same variable here and here, which is basically caching this selector here to basically make things more performant. We're just going to append, and we're going to append HTML here. And we want to use multiple lines to make it a little bit cleaner. And so let's, to do that, we're going to use backslashes here, and that's going to look kind of ugly at first, but with backslashes, we can do multiple lines. And so let's do tr. So we're putting backslashes at the end of every line to make sure so that we can do multiple lines. We're going to do td. And so here we want to input in the to-do. So we're going to basically do string concatenation. So basically this here is a block of string together. They're just kind of split up by the backslashes. we're going to add in the to-dos dot task, and then we're going to continue with our string here. Get rid of this right there. And so you can see here that this is a block together, this is a string, this is a block together, we're adding in the to-do task, and then this here finishes off the string right there. So we have 3 distinct blocks here. And let's just also put in the action buttons here. So let's do TD, and let's just put in buttons here. And these are just we won't do anything with them yet. Let's just do edit and delete. Delete. And next, we actually need to call this method. So let's just do down here app.showTodos. And then let's refresh our browser here to make sure that they show up. And you can see here that these are undefined. And that is because this should actually just be to do, not to dos. And let's refresh again. And now you can see our items have been appended into this table. So we've begun using jQuery, and we've just used this selector to append these to-do items into our table there. So let's just continue now. Next thing we want to do is let's hook up this task thing. So remember here we have them start off as red and then they turn green. So let's hook that up now. Oh, and by the way, this .html method here is another jQuery method that just makes emptying and setting HTML easier. And so we'll be using as many jQuery methods as we can in this tutorial. So now let's set up the clicking the red and the green buttons here. So first thing we want to do is let's create some classes here. So let's create a new file here called styles.css. And inside of here, let's create a class called to-do-task that will start off as green, or start off as red, because that's going to mean that it isn't completed. And our cursor is going to be a pointer here, because we want them to know that it's able to be clicked. And so let's just really quickly just add this class here. So to do that, we are going to, inside of here, this for each, let's create a class. And I'll explain why we're making this a variable right now, because later on we're going to make this dynamic. It's going to switch between 2 different classes to show red or green. So right now we're just going to have one class. It's just going to be to do task. And let's put in here the class here. So this is going to have the class. And we're going to do string concatenation here. So let's just put in here task classes plus here. Oops. And we do need to put this into our index.html as well. So let's do that by putting above the title here. Let's put in link rel equals style sheet pref equals styles.css. We'll close that right there. And then let's refresh our browser. And now we can see that both of these are red. And now we want, if they're completed, we want it to be green. So we want this take a nap here to be green. And to do that, let's go back to our styles.css and let's create a new class here called isCompleted. And so let's do isCompleted here. And the color is just going to be green. And now we want to make our classes dynamic by going to scripts. And here we're going to say if it is completed, so if to do or plus to do dot is completed. So if it is completed, this is going to be a ternary operator. We're going to add in, we're going to put a space here to separate it from to do task. We're going to put in is completed. And if it is not complete, we're just going to put in an empty string there. And that'll automatically be put into this variable right here. So now let's refresh our browser. And we can see that take a nap here is now green. All right, so the next thing we want to do is we want to make it so that when we click on these, they'll swap between green and red, and I did something there. So right now, when you click on it, it doesn't do anything. So to do click handlers in jQuery, we're going to do something like this. So first we need to grab the item that we want to click on using a selector. And the element that we want to handle is this to-do task class right here. And so for IDs, we use these pounds. For classes, we use dots. And so here we're going to do to-do task here. And the way that we do click handlers is we're going to do dot on. And later on, we're actually going to change this, but we're going to do this for now just so you can see 2 different kinds of syntaxes. And so we're going to do on click. We're going to run this function. We're just going to say alert clicked just to test this out for now. And so let's try that. We're saving it. Let's refresh our browser. When we click this, now the alert will show up. So that is how you do jQuery click handlers. And the way that we're going to implement our toggling is let's create a new method in here called toggle to-dos. And so let's put in toggle to-dos. And it's going to be another function. And for now, let's just test this out by doing putting an alert in here. So toggled, just to make sure that we're setting this up correctly. And instead of this function here, we're just going to do put in app.toggle to do. There's only one of them. Toggle to do. Let's save it, refresh our browser, and when we click on this, the alert does indeed show up, so things are getting hooked up correctly. And now, when we toggle the to-do for each of the to-dos, we want to match the one that we're clicking on and then toggle the is completed to the opposite. So in here, we want to be able to match the one that we click on to the correct to-do in this array. So we're going to need to iterate over that. So let's do to-dos.forEach, which is going to iterate over this array up here. And then we're going to say function to-do. So for the to-do in there, we're going to say if to-do.task is equal to, and we want to be able to match it to the item that we click. And the way that we do that is the item that we click is going to be referenced by the keyword this. And so actually, let's do that right now. If I just console log this after we click, it's going to be this specific element that right there. So I'm going to do that. Oh, and you see here that the this is referencing the window, and that's because we're not binding this function to the proper context here. So since we have this showing up inside of this function here, inside of forEach, we actually need to be able to bind this function to this current context. So we need to put in .bind this here, and that will make sure that this is bound to this context right here instead of the context of forEach, which will make it the window context. I know that's kind of confusing, so if you don't really understand how this works, you can go ahead and study kind of context and the keyword this. But if we click on this now, you'll see that it's going to be the element that we're clicking on here. So if we click on jQuery tutorial, it's going to log that element right there. And so what we can do is jQuery selectors can take in HTML elements as well. So we can say, if we want to console log this, so let's turn this into a selector. And the way that we can access the text inside of this HTML element is we can do another jQuery method called text. So let's just console log the text inside of the element. And so you'll see that it's just logging take a nap now. And so now what we can do is we can try to match the item in the array. So we'll say if to-do.task. So basically if this task in here matches the text that we click on is equal to this right here. So copy that, paste that there. So if the task matches with the item that we're clicking on, we are going to toggle the is completed. So we'll say to-do.isCompleted is equal to the opposite of to-do.isCompleted. So if it's true, it's going to become false. If it's false, it's going to become true. And then after we do this, we just want to refresh the to-dos list with the new is completed. And remember, we have this show to-dos method here. And this HTML will clear out everything and just kind of refresh it with this new array with the is completed toggled. So let's do app.showTodos. And let's test this out by refreshing our browser. And so now if we click on take a nap, it'll turn red. And if we click on jQuery tutorial, nothing happens. And here is why. After we click on take a nap, this entire page is basically refreshing. And this click handler here only works for elements that are already existing on the page. So once we refresh it, this selector no longer applies to what's on the page here because it's brand new. The way that we can fix that is jQuery has another syntax for click handling that will basically work for any item that shows up on the page later as well. And the way that we do that syntax is, let's just comment this out so we still have that there for reference. So we're going to use a different kind of syntax now. And the way that this works is we're going to first select a container element. So we're going to select the table here. So this entire table, it's going to contain this entire to-dos list here. And we're going to do dot on click. And then the second argument here is going to be what we want inside of that container to respond to our click event. And we're going to access the to-do task here. So basically anything inside of this table, whenever we click on this to-do task here, or we can make this a button, or we can make this an element, we can make this whatever we want. So anytime something inside of this table has that class, we are now going to run this method, toggle to do. And so let's try this again, and hopefully it will work. So we click on take a nap, it turns red. jQuery tutorial turns green. So now it works properly. So in general, this is a much better syntax for click handling because it works for new elements that show up on the page later. All right, so next what we want to do is we want to hook up this create button so that we can add to-dos to this list. And you'll notice if we click this create button right now, it refreshes the entire page. And so if I type in something here, it's going to refresh the page. We do not actually want that. We want to be able to handle this create without refreshing the page. And so the way that we can do that is first, let's create a click handler for that create button, or it's actually not going to be a click handler. It's going to be a submit handler. The difference between click and submit is that for submit, the enter button will work instead of just clicking. And so we want to be able to press enter inside of this form instead of just being able to click create. So we could create a click handler for the create button, or we could create a submit button, a submit handler for this entire create form, which is what we did up here. We made this into a form so that we can actually press enter instead of just clicking the create button. So let's create a submit handler. So what we can do here is we're going to choose our selector, which is going to be this create form, which we identified here. So it's going to be ID create form. And so we're using the pound sign there. And we're going to say on submit. We are going to, and this click handler will always work this way because this will always be here. We're never replacing it or refreshing it with anything. So we can use our original click handler syntax. And whenever we submit it, let's run a method called app.add to do. And let's add in that method right now. So let's do add to do here. And the way that we prevent the page from refreshing is, well, really quickly, let's just kind of show the problem with the page refreshing. Let's try to console log clicked here. And so you'll notice if we click this create button, it's not going to show up. You'll see that it's kind of flashing because the page is actually refreshing and it's disappearing. So the way that we prevent the page from refreshing is let's put an event here, and then we can do event.prevent default. So we're preventing the default behavior here. And when we do that, it will no longer refresh. The clicked will stick. So that is how you prevent the page from refreshing upon clicking the submit button for a form. So now inside of this add to do method, we are going to put in the code to add a to do. So first, let's cache the create input selector, just because we're going to be using it several times in here. Remember, our ID for that was create input right here. So that is our input box right there. And then let's create a create input value. So this is going to be the text inside of that box right there. So let's just do create input or create. Oh, this is going to be create input value here, or .val here. And this is another jQuery method, really useful. .val without anything in it is just going to grab the value of whatever's in the input box. Whatever we put in here, it would replace it. It would put this inside of the input box. So here we just want to grab the value. And so if we console log create input value, we will see that it will log what's inside of the input box. So let's just do create to see that it's logging whatever's inside the input box. If we did something else, this is just to show you something different. Let's comment this out. If I just did create input.val and I just put in hello, it's going to put that into the input box. So let me refresh this. You see that put the hello in there. So just two different ways to use the value here. And this is just kind of makes it a little bit easier than the native JavaScript method, or the way that you do it with native JavaScript. So jQuery makes it more convenient. All right, so let's continue with this code. And so what we want to do is after we click the create button, we want to add a new item to this to-dos array. So what we can just do is we can just say to-dos.push, and we're going to push, the task is going to be equal to the create input value, and is completed is going to be false. And then after we do that, we want to refresh the show to-dos there. So we're going to call this method that's going to refresh the page. But you'll notice it's not quite perfect yet, because if we do hello or wash dishes, we can press enter here actually. you'll notice that it's still, the text is still in there. So we want to empty it after we press the create button. You'll notice we can also press create or press enter. They all work. But this is kind of weird that we can do that. That's kind of janky. So the way that we can clear the input is, let's just down here do create input dot val, and then we're just going to clear it out like that. So now let's refresh the page. Try it again. Wash dishes, and you'll notice it clears out. And you'll notice that we can still add empty ones there, but we're going to do validation a little bit later, so don't worry about that for now. But we are now able to add to-dos, which is pretty neat. So that is how you do that. All right, so now the next thing we want to do is be able to click the edit button here and have it switch these buttons to be save and cancel instead of edit and delete. You'll see here when I click edit, it turns into save and cancel. And this turns into an input, but we'll do that a little bit later. So to do that, let's go back to our code here. And let's actually put in 2 other buttons here. And let's also add in classes for these buttons. So let's put in a save button. And then let's put in a cancel button. And we do not want them all to show up at the same time. But you'll notice right now they'll all show up. And so let's add in classes for all of them. And this is just sublime fanciness. And we're gonna just give them all names. And this one will be edit. This one will be delete. This one will be save. This one will be cancel. And let's start off by making the save and the cancel buttons hidden. You'll see that they're still there. So we're gonna go here, and we're just gonna say save button display none, and then cancel button display none. And so you'll see that they are no longer there. And so that is how we do that. Next thing we want to do is let's create a enter edit mode code. And so let's create another click handler down here. And we're going to use this second syntax because, again, these list items, they're going to be refreshing. And so we want to be able to click these no matter when we are clicking them, even after it's been refreshed. So we're going to, again, use the table as our container. And then we're going to say on click. And then we're going to say when we click on the edit button, we are going to run a method called enter edit mode. And now up here, let's create our method called enter edit mode. And to do that, let's just do enter edit mode. Well, that's ES6 syntax. I'm really used to that. Function. And what we want to do when we enter it is we want to show the save and the cancel button, and we want to hide the edit and the delete button. So we're just going to do another jQuery method here. So we're going to say identify the save button. You'll notice that we had classes up here, so we're using the dot syntax. Save button dot show, and then cancel button dot show. And then we're going to hide the edit button, and you can guess that the method is just going to be hide. And then the delete button, we are also going to hide. So now let's just try that really quickly, just doing that and nothing else. Click edit, you'll see that it switches to save and cancel, but you'll notice that nothing else happens yet there. So now let's just do the opposite really quickly, and let's create a click handler for the cancel button. So when we click on cancel, it should revert back to the save, or back to the edit and the delete. So this is going to be the exact same thing except for the cancel button. We're just going to say app.exit edit mode. This is just pretty fun to be able to manipulate the DOM like this with jQuery. So exit edit mode, and we're just going to do the exact opposite. So we can copy paste this stuff right here. And we're just going to switch these to hide and switch these to show. And now if we refresh our browser, if we click edit, it'll go there. If we click cancel, it'll. And the problem with our code is that I spelled button wrong here. This should be B-O-B-T, whatever. So now let's refresh our browser, click edit, cancel, and so they should be able to switch back and forth between the two. And you'll notice something odd is that when we click edit, it's going to switch the buttons for both of these right here. We only wanted to switch it for one, and actually my demo here does the same thing. So we're going to fix that problem right now. So here is how we are going to fix that problem. So in here, we want to be able to limit these actions to just the cell that we are clicking in. The way that we can do that is we're going to do something called traversing the DOM, which is another thing that jQuery is really powerful in. So I'll explain what that looks like. So first, what we're going to do is we are going to narrow our focus to just this one action cell right here. So this one save and this one cancel. So this, let's just create a variable called actions cell that we're clicking on. And remember, we can access the, this is going to be the HTML element, and we want to turn that into a selector. So this is going to be the selector for this HTML element that we click on right there. Specifically, it's going to be the, well, it's going to be the edit button first. So this here is going to represent the edit button. And we want to be able to just expand out to this entire action cell. The way that we can do that is we can say dot closest. Closest is just going to look through the ancestors and find the closest thing that we put in here. So we want to find the closest TD. And so you'll see up here that we have these buttons here. So we're clicking the edit button, and the closest TD is going to be this one right here. Later on, we're going to identify this one as well. But first, our variable is going to represent this TD right there. And so that is going to be our action cell. And basically what we want to do is we only want these actions to happen for the buttons inside of this one action cell. So what we can do is we can put action cell at the beginning of each of these. And there's another jQuery method called find. And let's get rid of this $ here. What find is going to do is it's going to look inside of our selector here and find whatever class or thing that we're looking for. So specifically, we want to be finding these buttons right here. And we want to show and hide only those specific buttons inside of the one action cell that we are clicking in. So we can see here that jQuery is pretty powerful with being able to traverse the DOM and kind of look around and narrowly figure out exactly which elements we want to show and hide and mess around with. So if we click edit here, you'll notice that only the top one here is saving and canceling now. The bottom one is remaining with edit and delete. If we do cancel, it'll revert back. But just to be safe, let's do it for both of these right here. So let's just do the same thing here for our action cell. That way we're just narrowing down exactly which buttons we want to show and hide. We can actually just copy this. So I'm going to paste that, and then let's copy this, and then paste those in there. And, you know, pressing the cancel won't ever really matter because we're only going to have one open anyways. But just to be safe, you know, it's only messing with the one row there. So that is how we do that. All right, so next what we want to do is we want to be able to have this turn into an input box. When we click edit there, you'll see that it turns into an input with our task inside of the input box. The way that we're going to do that is we are going to, so when we click edit, we want to be able to edit the TD or the table cell to the left of the actions one. And there's another jQuery method that we can use to get the previous element. You'll notice that our actions element, action cell, is going to be this TD right here. We want to be able to mess with this TD element right there. And you'll notice that it comes right before this TD right here. And so you can think of it as the previous element. So what we can do here is we can say var task cell, the cell with the task in it, is going to be equal to action cell. Remember, this is going to represent the element, the TD element that it surrounds the button that we click on. And it's just going to be .prev. This is another jQuery method, and it's just going to give us the previous element to the one that we currently have selected, or to the previous element to this selector right here. And what we can do down here now is we can say task cell dot remove class. So we want to get rid of that to do task class because it's going to turn our mouse into a pointer over that cell, and we don't want that. And remove class is another really useful jQuery method. There's also remove class. There's add class, and there's also toggle class. Toggle class is pretty useful as well. And we want to actually save the current task, because then when we press cancel, we want to be able to revert back to whatever our original task was. So let's create a variable called app.currentTask is equal to task cell dot. Remember, we can use text to grab whatever text is in there. So right now, text will grab do jQuery tutorial or take a nap. And now we want to change the HTML for the task cell. Remember, we have the HTML method. You'll see this time we are going to replace it instead of empty it. So we're just going to put in there an input type equals text. And the class is going to be edit input. We're going to use this to kind of grab the value that's in there. And then we're going to have the value is equal to. And we are going to do some string concatenation again. Again, this is pretty ugly. I like using JS6 or ES6 syntax, which is a lot cleaner. But for now, this will do. We're just going to say the value inside of the input will be the current task right there. And so let's refresh our browser. So when we click edit, that turns into an input box. Well, that didn't work quite exactly the way we wanted. And that is because I forgot an equal sign here. So value equals that right there. So now let's refresh our browser. Go back here. And now when I press edit, you'll see that the task is inside of this input box right there. And so that is working as expected, and we can cancel out of this. You'll notice when we press cancel, that doesn't work. So let's fix that right there. What we can do now is we can say down here as well, let's create a task cell variable. Task cell is equal to action cell dot previous or prev. And then when we exit edit mode, we want to replace the input back with the task HTML or the task text. So we're just going to say task cell. We're going to put back the class, add class, to do task. You'll notice that since we're doing add class, we don't need the dot right there. So that's why we can leave that out there. And we're just going to say task cell.html, I can't type today, is going to be equal to app.currentTask, which we've stored inside of that variable, so that whatever changes we make to this right here, it'll revert back to whatever that was. So now let's try that again. We can click edit, cancel, and so that is working as expected. All right, next thing we want to do is we want to be able to actually save whatever we put inside of, we want to be able to save whatever we put in here. So if I change this to now, we want to be able to save it. This button obviously doesn't work yet because we haven't hooked that up yet. All right, so to set up the save button, what we're going to do is we're first going to create another click handler here. So let's just do table.onClick, kind of the same syntax here, save button. We are going to run app.save to do, and then up here, or let's say save task here, task, and then down here, let's create a method called save task. And so used to ES6 syntax. It's going to be function, and then down here we're going to grab the we're going to make a variable called new task, and in here we're going to grab the edit input, which we created in here. So this or not in there, we made it in here, this edit input right here. We're going to grab that value, and so we're just going to go straight for the value here. So remember, we have this current task variable which stores the original to do, and what we can do is we can use that variable to match the item. So again, we want to switch the task in the correct for the correct item to be the new input value. So we need to be able to match the correct row to the new task that we want to replace it with. And so what we can do is we're going to do the same thing that we did up here by iterating through the to-dos. But this time, instead of matching to-do.task equals this, we're going to try to match to-do.currentTask, which was the original task inside of that row. So what we can do is to-dos.forEach function to-do. And in here, we're going to say if app.currentTask. So this was the original task inside of the cell, which we stored as a variable for this purpose, is equal to to-do.task. So if the current task is equal to the task, then we know that that is the correct row that we want to do the replacing in. then we are going to say to-do.task is equal to new task. And now we want to update the current task to be the new task because remember, when we exit the edit mode, we're going to replace the HTML with the current task. So we want that to be the correct task in there. Now, if we were to just do this, if we try to save it, it's not going to exit the edit mode, which we want it to do. But we can't just do app.exit edit mode. And we'll show you the reason why. We're going to, inside of here, we're going to log this. You'll notice that this inside of this log is going to actually be not the button. You'll see that this is going to be the current task because you'll notice that the context with which we're calling exit edit mode here is going to be the context of this app object here, whereas down here, when we called exit edit mode, we're calling it with the context of this HTML element that we're clicking on. And so what we need this to reference the save HTML button that we're clicking on, not this app object here. The way that we can do that is instead of calling this directly, we can just say .call. .call allows you to specify a specific context to call this method with. So we're calling it with this context. And remember, this save task has the context of this save button. And so this down here will now be the HTML element for the save button, which will make these the same because the action cell is going to be the same for the save or the edit or the cancel button or any of those. So now if we edit this and we edit that, press save. Oh, and the problem is that I put these inside of the for each when these should have gone outside of there like that. So now if I were to call this again and try to save, it's going to save with the correct button context. And you'll notice that it works correctly now and that this context is the button. So that is basically just a little trick to get things to do what we want them to do. And so now our save task button works correctly. So that is pretty cool. Now what we're going to do is let's move on to the delete task button. So to do that, let's create another click handler. And this is going to be very similar to what we've done before. So let's do down here, table on click. And this time it's going to be the delete button. And we're going to say app.delete task. And to do delete task inside of this object up here, let's just create a new method called delete task. And it's going to be function. And to do that, we're just going to say var task to delete. So now what we're going to do is we're actually going to do some fancy DOM traversal here because when we click the delete, we want to be able to grab this text here and match it to the proper item in the array that we want to delete here. And so they're in different cells, and so we need to be able to traverse the DOM to be able to grab that text. And so what we can do is we can say this. So remember, this is going to refer to this actions or this specific button that we have there. So we're going to say this dot, and we're going to use parent this time. Parent is going to do something very similar to closest, whereas closest will find all of the ancestors. Parent is just going to be looking for the direct parent of this element. We could use closest here, but parent works just as well. So we're just using different methods here. And so again, we're just going to find the parent that is a TD, and we're going to do previous, which is going to take us. So this right here is going to take us to this action cell right here. The .prev is going to take us to the task cell here, and we want to grab the text inside of there. So you can see here that jQuery can do some pretty fancy stuff with DOM traversal. And just to cache, in case we have like maybe 1,000 to-dos, we're going to just cache it so that we can kind of make things more performant. This isn't really necessary, but it's just kind of another way to do things. So var found is equal to false, so that when we find it, we're going to set it equal to true so that we don't need to do any other checks. Let's see. And we want to be able to manipulate the array here by basically getting rid of one. So to do that, we're going to use an index there, and I'll show you how we're going to do that with splice in a little bit. And so we're just going to say if we have not found the item yet, and the task to delete is equal to the to-do.task. So basically, if this text that we're clicking on here matches with the task in here, we're going to delete that specific item in the array. So if it matches, we are going to do todos.splice. And splice is just a convenient way to get rid of an item in an array without leaving an empty space in there. So we're going to say splice at the index that we found the to-do at, and we're just going to get rid of one item in there. And you can look up splice. There's also a third argument that you can put in, so you can insert items in there if you wanted, but we're not using that third argument there. But look up how to use splice. It's a really useful array method. And then we're just going to say found equals true, so that if we find it, we don't need to check anymore for any other items in the array. And then after we delete it, we just want to refresh the and something about splice is it will actually mutate the arrays. So this new array will be so this array will transform into one without the item that we are deleting. And then we're just going to refresh the page with app.showToDos. So let's refresh our page and then press delete, and you can see that that works. And we can add in new tasks there and delete them. We can edit them. So all of our functions, or all of our basic create, add, edit, delete, and save, they all work now. So that is pretty cool. All right, so before we do the validation, we're just going to do one quick thing where we're going to turn this create button green with the rounded corners. And we're not going to use CSS for this. We're going to use jQuery just to kind of show you how we can do this with jQuery. And so to do this, what we're going to do is let's do the selector. And so we're going to select the create form button. And so another thing you can do with jQuery is you can choose a selector, and then you can look inside of that. So basically this is anything that you can do with CSS. So if we were to do this, we would find a button inside of this ID of create form. And you can do that with CSS as well. So if I were to do create form button, that would select the button inside of the create form. We're just doing that inside of a jQuery selector here. And what we can do here is we can do .css. And I'm going to show you two different ways to manipulate CSS this way. So we can do background with a string quote, green. And so if I were to refresh the browser here, it's going to turn that button green. And then there's another way to do it, which is with just an object. And so let's just do create form button .css, and we can put objects in here as well. So we can do something like we can say color white, and we need to put quotes around that, and then border radius. We can use camel case with jQuery CSS, so we don't need to do border dash radius. I think we could do that as well. So we can do that as well, and that's going to change that button to look a little bit nicer like that. So here we're just showing you how you can manipulate CSS with jQuery really easily rather than using CSS. Mainly you would do this with dynamic CSS changes with JavaScript. You wouldn't normally do this with normal styling. All right, so the last thing we're going to do is we're going to set up some validation. Remember, for this thing here, if there's an empty box, we have this thing that slides down and then fades out when we start typing. So just really, really cool animations there. So let's just do that. So this is going to actually go inside of our add to do. So inside of here, we're going to have some validation. But really quickly, let's first style our validation and say error message, just so we can direct what it looks like. The background is going to be red, and then the color, let's make it white. Display, we're going to start off displaying none, and then the width, let's just make it 180 pixels. You'll see here that I have it so that it doesn't take up the entire row. But before we put code into the add to do method there, let's just put in our error message thing here. But it's going to be displayed none first, so let's just say class equals error message. And it's not going to show up at first because we have this display none here. And apparently I can't do this syntax right here. I'm not really sure why, so we need to actually close that div. And so if we were to refresh this, it will not show up there. So now let's add in our validation code. We're going to say before we push the to-dos into the array, we want to do some validation. So we're going to first initialize an error variable to be no. So we're assuming right now that there's no errors. And if there is an error, we are going to show the message. So first thing, if it is an empty input box. So we're just going to say if there's no create input value, basically if it's empty, we're going to say error is equal to task cannot be empty. And then we also want to have a validation for if we try to type in a duplicate to do. So we don't want to be able to have the same exact, well, I guess if I were to do it here, take a nap, you can enter in the same to do. We don't want that. So we're going to say, we're going to iterate over the to-dos. So for each function to do, and we're going to say if to-do.task is equal to create input value. So if it's a duplicate, we're going to set the error to task already exists. And let's put in a period here as well. And then down here, we're going to say if there is an error, we are going to do app.showError, and then we're going to give it the specific error message. So this error is going to be, just to make it clear, let's make this error message just to make it clearer. And then we are going to also return here. So we do not want to push the item into the array if there's an error. It's only if there's no error that we're going to allow it to be added to the array. So now down here, let's create a new method called showError, and it's going to have the message as an argument. So showError function error message, and we're just going to say I'm going to grab the selector, so the error message selector that we have right here, which is right underneath the create form. And what we're going to do here is we're just going to do another jQuery method, and these are the fun methods here. It's going to be slide, or we're going to say the HTML is going to be the message, error message. So we're going to fill that div with this error message here. And then to get it to show, we could just do show, but that'll just make it blink in instantly. We can do something called slide down. So that is a little bit cooler. So let's try that out really quickly, like that. So if I were to create, it'll slide down, but and then if I have a duplicate, take a nap, it will do the same thing. So, but we can't clear it yet, so let's be able to clear the error message now. And the way that we're going to do it for this app is we're going to clear it on key up. So whenever we lift our finger from the keyboard, we want this to clear. So if I were to type something, it's going to clear the error. And so what we can do is we can have another event listener here. And so instead of just on submit, we can say create form, or let's say create input. So create input dot on, and there's another event called key up, and just on clear up we're going to say clear error, and clear error is going to use another jQuery animation. We're not going to do, we could do slide up, but we're going to do something a little bit different just to play around with different jQuery stuff. So we're just going to do error message. This time we're going to say fade out. So it's going to slowly fade out. So let's test that out. So if it's empty, task cannot be empty. If I press W, it will fade out. If I try to type in an existing thing, it'll slide down again. Task already exists. If I try to add something, it's going to fade out. So that is our app. It is basically finished. And thanks a lot for watching. I hope you learned something from this. jQuery is a lot of fun. It's not the best tool to use for building an app from scratch. There's much better tools as frameworks to use, such as React and Angular and Backbone. But jQuery is just such a foundational tool to use just to kind of manipulate the DOM and do a lot of cool stuff that would be a lot tougher with just native JavaScript. So thanks a lot for watching, and I will see you next time.